Hey there, welcome to my YouTube channel, I Create with Color. My name is Kelli Needham, and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in Brighton, Colorado. I want to share with you today a fun technique that I kind of meshed together from a couple of different places. The first is a card that I saw in a really old magazine where they had just taken a stamped outline and doodled on it to give it some extra detail, and so I wanted to kind of combine that with a stamp that I've been wanting to use. It's an older stamp that we have, and I like to come up with new ways to use stuff that I already have. So this kind of put a new little spin on this stamp right here, this butterfly stamp. And part of my inspiration came from a coloring book that I came across in my stash that has a whole bunch of different butterfly designs in it. And one of the things that I liked about it is it uses this Zentangle, which is basically creating intricate patterns by doing repetitive designs. And it's kind of like a fancy doodling, if you will. And in this book, there were a lot of different Zentangle designs, and you can see how elaborate they are. But it basically just looks like a whole bunch of doodles. This one happens to be all over a page. One of the other ones that caught my eye was this butterfly page here, and you can see how they've used these repetitive lines to create this intricate pattern on the butterflies. So that was part of the inspiration for this project. And so I'm going to show you real quick a little bit of up close. You can see all of these lines and things that are on this butterfly I had actually hand drawn in, and I'll show you the supplies we're going to use for this project, and then we'll get started. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the stamp sets that we're going to be using. And Beautiful Day is the stamp set that this butterfly came out of, and as you can see on the cover here, it looks fairly small, but the butterfly itself is actually a really large stamp. It takes up a good area on your card front, which is kind of nice because you don't have to have a whole lot of stamps to make, you know, really cool card. You can just use one larger image. And then the saying that is on my card uses this varied vases, and it's this "you are simply the best" sentiment here. And I really like this one because for those little skinny strips that you might want to stamp on, it has quite a few different sentiments in there that would work great for that. So that's where my sentiment came from. And our supplies we're going to be needing for this project today are fairly few. You're going to be needing a piece of white scrap to stamp the butterfly on. I have here a piece of Bermuda Bay cardstock, which is 8.5 by 5.5 inches. Then I have a piece of basic black, which is 5 1/4 by 4. I have a piece of Whisper White, which is 5 by 3 3/4, and I also have a little strip of black cardstock here, which is 3 inches by 1/2 inch. Now, I will tell you, I've already gotten my sentiments ready to go because they were left over from another project that I did, and I basically just stamped it with Versamark and embossed it with clear embossing powder. So you can see here that it's got that shiny white embossing on that strip. So I'm going to be using those strips up that I had made for that other project because, you know, we make all these things and we have leftovers and hate to throw them away. So I'm going to be using that on this card today. Along with those cardstock pieces and the stamp set that I showed you, I'm going to be using a Tuxedo Black Memento ink pad and our Smoky Slate Classic pad. And that's basically the supplies that we're going to need, not a whole lot today. Along with those, we're going to be using Stampin' Blends markers, and I have a whole bunch of different colors that I'm going to be using. I'm not going to name them all for you, but I will list them in the description. So as you can see, I've got quite a few from my stash. Now, if you do not have Stampin' Blends, which are alcohol-based markers, you can use any other type of alcohol-based marker for this. So if you have Copics or some other brand from, you know, one of the other craft stores, things like that, you can try this technique with those as well, and they will work just fine. Along with that, you are going to need a marker of some sort that you can do your doodling with. And in this case, I'm just using a Stampin' Write marker, and I'm going to just use the basic black out of the set. But you could use, if you have a Copic multiliner or something else that is water-based that you can use to be able to color over and not have it bleed, that's what you want. So I'm going to bring in my pieces here, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of our stamping to get that ready and out of the way. So on my scrap piece of paper, I'm going to stamp with my Tuxedo Black this butterfly image, and it's a fairly heavily outlined image, and because it is a larger stamp, I'm going to turn it upside down and make sure that when I ink this with my ink pad, I'm getting that coverage really well on there. Now you could use a Stamparatus if you wanted to, but I found that this was just as easy. So I'm just going to stamp this here on my cardstock. And I'm going to set that one aside and let it dry for a second. And then I'm going to bring in my other piece of Whisper White, which is the 5" by 3 3/4 inch. And I'm going to stamp this butterfly again on that piece. And the reason that I want to do this is because we're going to be cutting out the image that we stamped on our scrap paper once it's all colored, and we're going to be layering it onto our card front. So I'm going to stamp this a little bit higher than center, kind of off kilter, so that it adds some interest. And I'm going to stamp that really well on there. And then I'm going to have to clean off my stamp because I'm going to stamp again this butterfly image with my Smoky Slate. Clean this here really quick. I'm going to bring in that Smoky Slate ink pad and get it all ready to go. Alright, and I happen to have a piece of scrap paper here that I'm going to be using off to the side. I want to stamp off my gray before I stamp it on my paper here, because I want to get a little bit lighter of an impression than what you get with the solid Smoky Slate. So I'm going to ink that up here just like that, and I'm going to make sure that I have it really well inked, and I'm going to stamp that off the first time onto my scrap paper over here. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to layer this on top of the black one. And as you can see, it's going to overlap just a little bit. That's okay. It's going to be covered up for the most part with our solid colored image. And I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to stamp off with my scrap paper over here. And then I'm going to stamp this butterfly again at the top. And again, it's going to overlap my black butterfly just a little bit. Okay, so that is all of the stamping that we need to do for right now. So I'm going to get all this stuff out of the way, and then I'm going to show you how I did the Zentangle part of this technique. So what you would do is you would take your black marker, whether you use a Stampin' Write marker or another one that's water-based, and you're going to want to use a fine tip for this, because the whole idea here is to get some intricate details into all of those little spaces in this butterfly. And it doesn't matter what kind of doodling you want to do. You can do any kind of doodles that you want. The cool part about this is you just want to be somewhat repetitive to get those designs throughout the whole thing. So for example, on these little sections here, all I did was take my marker and draw little ovals. And you don't have to worry too much about going into the black outline of the butterfly. It will all kind of blend together once it's colored. And so you just start adding your details to your butterfly. You can do stripes, you can do checkers, you can do pretty much anything that you want. And I try to repeat what I've done on one side. So what I've done over here, I try to repeat on this side. So this one, I'm just going to come in and I'm going to add some lines that way, and then I think I'm going to come in and add lines this way and just do kind of a checkerboard pattern on this part of it. Now, this does take a few minutes to do the whole entire thing, so what I have is one that I've already partially done, so you kind of get the idea. So I'm going to swap that out and bring this one in. So I have a few sections here that I'm going to go ahead and finish adding some details to. And I think I'm going to start over here, and I'm just going to add some little hearts in a chain to this section, which I realized I did on that one as well. But again, this is repetitive. So you kind of want those extra details to repeat all throughout your design. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm just going to add those in. And as you can see, I'm not being super particular. You can be as picky or not so picky as you want. The whole idea is just to create some intricate designs inside of each one of those little spaces. So on this one, I think I'm just going to do some curved lines here to fill this in. Sometimes the hard part is figuring out which direction they need to go when you start doing the other side, because you want to kind of mirror them. Okay, and just to add a little bit of interest in here, I'm just going to come in and add some little lines in here, and you'll see I've used a lot of the same doodling on each one of the samples I'm going to show you at the end. And it's just kind of preference, things that I've done before that I know work and look good. But play around and, you know, try some swirls and some dots and some lines and just see what you guys end up liking the best. And you may find you gravitate towards some designs more than others. All right, now that I have those done, the coloring part of this is really super simple. It's all personal preference. But on most of mine, what I've done is I've taken a light and a dark Stampin' Blends marker. And I've gone in on almost all of them, and I have just colored in one whole area with the light and gone back over it and highlighted certain sections with my dark. So for example, this one I'm going to fill in a few of these little sections with the darker color. Sorry, this tip is a little frayed on the edge. I'll use the other bullet end, might come out a little bit better. So see, I'm just adding some lights and some darks to give it some additional interest. Those were the pumpkin pie markers. Now I'm going to come in with my Mango Melody, and I'm going to use, again, my lightest one first. And there's no shading on this per se, it's just all basic coloring. So no need to worry about, you know, adding those lights and darks and blending and everything else. You're just basic coloring with these. The reason I like the alcohol markers is because you can color over all of this and not have to worry about any of it blending, or bleeding, I should say. And you can still get those lights and darks, and you don't have to be as particular and take forever trying to color in every single one of the little spaces. And the nice thing about these is if you do happen to color in an area that you don't want, you can go back with your lighter color and kind of push that darker ink back into an area where it should be and not necessarily where you don't want it. So that was my Mango Melody. Now for my greens, I'm actually using the light Granny Apple Green and the dark Old Olive. Mainly because the Granny Apple Green is a little bit more of a vibrant color, and my light Old Olive was starting to get kind of dried out. So these colors still work very well together. And obviously if you're using a different brand of marker, you can use whatever colors you have on hand to do this technique, which is kind of nice because you don't have to use per se exactly what I used. I'm noticing that some of my marker tips are getting a little worn out. Might be time to replace a few of them, I think. That's the nice thing about our Stampin' Blends, though, is they do have a bullet tip and a brush tip. So if you have trouble with your brush tip, you can flip your marker over and use this bullet tip on there. Alright, and last but not least, I have my rich Razzleberry, which is also my light and my dark, that I'm going to come in and do these with. And as you can see, I'm not being too particular. I'm just quickly coloring that in. And I will tell you, I love to color, so coloring all those little intricate details would not be a big deal for me, but I also don't want to have a hour-long video to, you know, to show you guys how I did this. And then with my dark, I'm going to come back in and color these ones with the little lines, and that kind of just gives it a little bit more interest. almost done. All right, last little section, and we are done with the coloring part of this. Okay, so I did spare you guys a little bit of the coloring time, but it really doesn't take that much time to do the whole entire butterfly. The other colors that I did use on there is the light real red and dark real red, and that kind of gives you these sections here. And then on the checkerboard and the little polka dots, it is the dark Pool Party and the dark Bermuda Bay. And I paired these up because mainly some of my other color markers have dried out and I've used them and used them, so they finally are running out of ink. But that kind of gives you an idea of the colors that I've used, and like I said, I'll put those in the description. Alright, so from here what we're going to do is just take a pair of scissors. Any scissors that you have will work to cut this out. And you're just going to cut right out around the outside edge of this butterfly. And because it is so large, it doesn't take very long to do. It's not very intricate of a butterfly either. And when we get to the antennas and the body part of this, we're going to actually cut those off, which is why I had you stamp in black the butterfly on the card base, or the card front, whichever you want to call it, because it's going to be way too hard to try and cut out those little tiny antennas on there. So by layering this, you're still going to get the body and the antennas without having to do all of that work of cutting out those little tiny things. So the body wouldn't be so bad, but the antennas, And if you have a machine or something that you can cut them out, like a scan and cut or something like that, you could do that as well. But I find this is just as easy. And this stamp set doesn't have a die that coordinates with it, so we'll just do a little bit of fussy cutting here on this butterfly. And as you can see, I'm not worrying too terribly much about, you know, getting every little tiny curve. Just cutting that out right around that edge. And again, I'm going to cut out right past that little tail, and I'm just going to cut that little tail right off of there. So now what I have is just a really pretty set of wings that we're going to use on the front of our card. Now, one of the things that I did that I'll go back and do after we get done, after I get done with the video, but I can still show you, is I have taken this piece right here and I have colored in these sections of this butterfly to match the sections that are on here. So for example, the greens, I'll go back and color these in with green. And just to show you that I've done that on this one already. So you can see that these sections match on here. And I just used the light colors because a whole lot of it isn't going to show. You're just going to see a little bit peeking underneath. So I'm just going to bring this one in and we're going to finish this up. So I have my image here that I've gotten all the way colored. I have my image on the card that has all of the spaces colored in. And what we're going to do is I've just layered my 3 pieces together, nothing fancy. Just use your Tombow mono adhesive or your snail, whatever adhesive you like. So put all those together. And then this one is going to get layered right on top of that one. And to do that, I'm going to use my Tombow multi-purpose glue, multi-purpose liquid glue. And I'm just going to put a little dab of that glue right there in the center of those wings. So hopefully you can see the little tiny dot of glue right in there. And then I'm going to layer that. I kind of like to line up the bottoms of my wings first before I stick it down. And then I'm just going to press that down right in the middle for a second until that glue sets. And then you can kind of take your fingernail and hold it where you want and lift those wings up. And as you can see, you're going to see just a little bit of those wings poking out underneath of there. And I'll do that on this side, kind of pop that up a little bit. So now you have a little bit of color underneath of there without having to try and duplicate all of those intricate designs that we put on there. And then I simply took one of my sentiments that I already had ready to go and, whoops, I put some dimensionals on the back, and I popped that right up here at the bottom. Now, another fun thing that you can do with your alcohol markers is I've added these embellishments onto my card, and hopefully you can see that each one of these is one of the colors that I used in my butterfly. So these are just our basic rhinestones. I have some on the sheet here, and I have taken my alcohol marker and I have just colored those with my alcohol marker just to give them some color. So you can take our basic rhinestones and just dress them up with a little bit of color from these alcohol markers, and it's kind of fun. You can do it with pearls. You can basically do it with anything that the alcohol markers will stick to. So as you can see, there's a Bermuda Bay one, and then I'm going to take a pumpkin pie, dark pumpkin pie marker, and I'm going to color another one here. And I think this might be careful when you use your markers for this. You might kind of want to use the side of it. That's why I think my marker tips got a little bit frayed. They still will color fine, they just don't do as intricate of details as maybe they could. The Daffodil Delight doesn't show up quite as well until you actually get the rhinestone onto a white card surface, which is why I used some of the other colors instead. Let's finish that last one, and we'll do the rich razzleberry and color that one purple. All right, so as you can see, I've taken my markers and I have just simply colored all of those in with different colors. So now you can make any of your rhinestones, any of your pearls match your project, which is kind of fun. And I'm just going to take this little tool that I use all the time. It's actually a clay tool, but it works great for this. And I'm just going to pop a few of those rhinestones off, and I'm going to put them right on my card. Just like that. And that just kind of adds a little bit of interest and fun colors to your card itself. I'll go with a green one down here and maybe a blue one. And I think I'll take the one of the last little yellow ones, and I'm going to add it down here. So you can add some fun little bling to your project, and that today is our finished card. Now normally I will stamp the insides, but I did not do that today. What I would probably do for this one is just cut a piece of white cardstock and maybe just stamp this butterfly down in the corner on the inside. I hadn't thought that far ahead before I decided to do this one. So there's that, and then basically my Bermuda Bay will be the card base for this one. And then that will help that Bermuda Bay pop out on there. And once I get that colored up, that will be the Bermuda Bay card as well. And this sentiment is going to go right on the bottom, just like the other ones. So I hope you enjoyed my video today. If you like the project and want to order any of the products that I have used today, please visit my store at creationcorner.stampinup.net, and you can make a purchase there. And if you have any questions, please leave me a comment. And I hope that you liked my videos. If you do, please hit like and share, and hopefully I will see you again soon. Thanks for stopping by.